Hi, I'm Molly, and welcome to my channel Bookshelf Mystic, where I talk about books probably in way too much detail that I've read lately. Today I'll be talking about Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. This book was written in 2019, I believe, and it is Sarah Gailey's first novel, although they have written short stories in the past. I read this book as a part of the Around the Year in 52 Books reading prompt called In the Beginning. So it had to have something to do with the words in the beginning. And since this is Gailey's first novel, I decided that that was the beginning of Gailey's novel career, so it fit the prompt. So this novel is about what would happen if Petunia Dursley became a private investigator with a drinking problem and solved a murder at Hogwarts. In other words, Ivy Gamble is a non-magical human whose sister, twin sister in fact, Tabitha, works at Osthorn Academy for Mages. She is a mage and has been estranged from Ivy for many, many years. Ivy has made her career as a private investigator, mostly investigating things like cheating spouses. She's never investigated a murder before. But one day, the headmaster, so to speak, of Osthorn shows up at her office and says that they need her help. So this book I thought was a lot of fun. I don't read a lot of mystery novels, though I do read a lot of fantasy, so I really enjoyed the blend of those two genres. And I think a lot of what I liked about this book was that it is a mystery. Frankly, I don't think I've read a mystery novel since maybe middle school, so I found it really enjoyable and comforting to have that sort of distinct plot structure to wrap the story around. So it starts with a really intriguing hook about finding this body that was cut in half lying on the library floor. And then it goes through Ivy's investigation of the crime as she questions the students and staff at Osthorn and ultimately solves the mystery. The setup of Ivy being a non-magical human, going to this magical high school to solve a mystery was a really cool way to explore and subvert some of the fantasy tropes that we're all used to. And as we read the book, we're kind of in the dark in the same way as Ivy. We don't understand the magic system, we don't really know what to expect at this school, and we never really find out that much about how magic works. We learn just enough, as does Ivy, to understand what happened to the murdered teacher, Sylvia Capley, but we never really get a full explanation of how some people are magic and how some people aren't, or how it really works, besides some conversations that she has with Rahul. So I'd really say this was kind of a middle point between a soft magic and a hard magic system, with soft magic being magic that exists to be a part of the story, not necessarily hard magic, which is magic that exists to have a framework around which to tell a story. So somewhere in the middle, since we don't really understand the magic fully, it almost plays a role as part of the plot. It's this mysterious force we don't understand. But we do learn a little bit about the magic system, and you kind of get the sense that if you were a student at this school, you'd understand enough about the magic to be able to use it. The character that we're reading about, Ivy, is a non-magical user, so she doesn't get to see the hard magic side of this magic, and neither do we. If we were reading this book from the point of view of Tabitha, perhaps we would see this as more of a hard magic system. So that was kind of cool. So the mystery parts of this book were entertaining as well. Like I said, I haven't read a mystery book for a long time, so I think I enjoyed a lot of the book just from being pretty unfamiliar with the genre. But I also thought it was really fun to watch Ivy exercising her professional skills as a private investigator to get the upper hand and solve the mystery. It was really entertaining to see Ivy's interrogations of the students and staff, her clever ways of pulling information out that they may not have wanted to reveal. You don't get the impression that Ivy is perfect or too clever, like Sherlock Holmes style. You just think that she has the skills it takes to be a good private investigator, and it's fun to see her tricking teenagers into telling her what they know. I really enjoyed Gailey's unique, sardonic humor in this book. There are a lot of passages that I thought were really fresh and funny in a way that didn't seem too cliche. Gailey uses a lot of hyphenated words as adjectives. For example, the "oh god, what landmine have I stepped on" panic in a bartender's face as he is talking to Ivy and finds out that her mother died of cancer. These descriptions I thought were clever and funny at the same time as being relatable. Like, I know exactly what that face looks like and I can imagine it perfectly. Throughout the whole book, that tone sort of keeps up. Ivy herself is a little bit sarcastic, and it's told in first person, so you really get that kind of sense of humor throughout the novel. Frankly, for a novel about an alcoholic, lonely private investigator that solves a murder, it's actually kind of lighthearted, and I enjoyed that. One minor gripe that I have about the writing style, which overall I thought was great and readable and fun, is that there are a couple of phrases Gailey uses throughout the book several times to the point where I think they start to get cliche. One of them is my pet peeve anyway, that across a lot of authors, I don't know why people do this. Ivy bites her lip frequently when she's thinking. I personally have never bitten my lip as an indicator of pondering something or thinking. I think it's a little bit lazy to throw that in for a character since I don't think it's actually that common. Just seems to be shorthand for either being nervous or thinking. I think there are a lot of different ways that Gailey could have described that. They use really interesting adjectives and descriptive language throughout the rest of the book. I just wish that they had picked something else instead of Ivy biting her lip so many times. It might have been lampshaded at one point when Rahul points out that she's biting her lip, but it still kind of came up several times such that it stuck out to me. The book takes place mostly within Ozthorn Academy, which is basically a magic high school. And there's a lot of emphasis on the high school part of that description. Ivy makes a lot of cutting observations about what it's like to be a teenager, no matter if you're a magic person or just a regular person in high school. She talks about that feeling of wanting one thing that really defines you and gives your life purpose that is really universal across every teenager, whether it's getting asked to prom by, your dream date, or solving a murder mystery, or fulfilling a prophecy about being the chosen one. We've all had those daydreams of the thing happening that brings purpose to our life. Throughout the book, she kind of ties back her observations to her own experiences in high school. It's almost a nostalgic place, even though it's a magical high school that, none of us have ever been to, and neither has she. A lot of the action takes place in some of the same places throughout the book. So there are a lot of scenes in Ivy's apartment, in this one particular bar, and in the same classrooms in the school. It's not really a problem. It kind of lends a sense of familiarity after a while. And we don't really see too much of the magical world outside of those few places, which kind of lends to that feeling of being an outsider and not really ever getting to understand exactly what's happening in this magical world that Ivy and thus the reader will never be a part of. Another thing I liked about this book is the casual way that sexuality is dealt with. So Ivy goes on a few dates with Rahul, who is a man, so there's a heterosexual pairing. But there are a lot of non-heterosexual pairings discussed throughout the book. For example, Tabitha is gay and, is brought up a few times, ends up being part of the plot, but it's not really commented on as more than just, part of who she is. Also, at one point, sort of just in one line, it's revealed that Rahul had a male boyfriend in the past. Now he's dating Ivy, who's female. So it's just sort of a casual treatment of sexuality, which I really enjoyed. I would love to see more books where someone's orientation doesn't define them really in any way. It's just sort of part of the character and part of the story. All right, there's going to be some spoilers ahead, so I'll put up a spoiler tag. Go ahead and skip this section if you don't want to hear any spoilers about the book. I thought the ending was pretty satisfying, the way that Ivy found out who killed Sylvia Capley and why. I sort of suspected it was Tabitha for most of the book, so I wasn't necessarily surprised when it was. However, I didn't know exactly why it happened or how, so that was still fun to find out. Although I also did think that it was telegraphed pretty early on that there was something to do with cancer, especially since there was such an emphasis on Ivy's mother dying of cancer as well, and Tabitha feeling like she couldn't stop the cancer with her mother, and then, as we see, couldn't stop it with Sylvia, her lover, either. I was a little bit confused about the scene right before Ivy finds out that Tabitha killed Sylvia, when Ivy is interrogating Alexandria in a classroom with Tabitha watching. So Ivy is trying to get Alexandria to confess that she murdered Sylvia, which of course we find out she actually didn't. But as this is happening, Dylan comes out of hiding and advances on Alexandria when he blows up. Now, it's not entirely clear to me who did this or how it happened. It's sort of taken for granted from everyone's reactions later that Alexandria exploded him and then put him back together, and thus is shown to be the chosen one. Everyone kind of accepts this premise. However, Courtney, soon after this scene, tells Ivy that Tabitha had done that exact same thing to her as she was performing a magical abortion. So it kind of casts doubt on whether Alexandria or Tabitha were actually the one to explode Dylan and also to put him back together again. So if you've read this book and you think you understand what happened there, feel free to leave a comment. I'm pretty sure it was supposed to be Alexandria, but it was a little bit interesting how there was doubt thrown on that kind of right after it happened, so it's never really clear what really occurred. Another slight spoiler here that I wanted to talk about, which has to do with Ivy and Rahul's relationship. First of all, Rahul is great. I sort of have a crush on him myself. But the thing that I really liked and what I wanted to mention is when Ivy reveals to him that she's non-magical, he is mad and doesn't forgive her right away. Justifiably, she's been lying to him the whole time that he knows her. He's not going to want to say, oh, it's okay, I love you for who you are, which you might see in some maybe less original books. But he's not going to get over that so easily. And by the end of the book, Ivy does try to make amends. She shows up at his apartment, really in the last scene of the book, to apologize and, to see if he's willing to forgive her. But we never find out if he does or not. The book ends before we see that conclusion. And that's kind of how life is too. Like, Ivy shows up and doesn't know how things are going to go, and Ivy's come a long way in needing to pretend to be someone else versus asking someone to accept her for who she is. And she's doing a brave thing by showing up at Rahul's place, not knowing how it's going to go. And I think that it's even more striking to read and not find out ourselves. So I gave Magic for Liars 4 out of 5 stars. Thought it was a really entertaining read. If you have thoughts about the book, if you've read it and you agree or disagree with some of my takes, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd love to know what you think.
Thanks for watching my first video. If you'd like to see more of me talking about books that I'm reading, feel free to like and subscribe to this channel. See you soon!